Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
Texas Democratic lawmakers who fled the state on Monday are in Washington, D.C. in an attempt to block Texas's voting bills. Governor Greg Abbot is now calling for their arrest. NTD's Jason Perry spoke with constitutional expert Rick Green to find out the details.
The Democratic lawmakers who fled Texas are still in Washington, D.C. Some of them believe that Texas's voting bills are in retaliation to the 2020 presidential election.
These Republicans in this legislature may have changed the Messiah, Jesus, to Trump, but I haven't. And I'm going to make sure that everything that I can do, that my constituents' right would not be stripped from them because of what they believe in is a lie. Trump lost the election. Yes, he did. And they need to tell the people of this country the truth.
Others are calling on Congress to take bold action to stop the Texas bills.
We can't stay here indefinitely to run out the clock, to stop Republican anti-voter bills. That's why we need Congress to act now and pass the For the People Act.
A former Texas lawmaker and America's constitutional coach, Rick Green, says the Texas voting bills are not meant to restrict voting rights.
We're trying to stop in Texas, which is chaos in the elections. We don't want election officials to be able to change the rules at the last minute to favor one side over the other. We don't want people to be able to go in and vote without guaranteeing who they are. And we want to make sure that the absentee ballot process is not manipulated, that it's only used for those few people that absolutely cannot show up and vote at the polls.
But the Texas Democrats left the state so the election reform bills could not be voted on. U.S. Senator John Cornyn described the move as taking your ball and going home in the middle of the game.
They got on two chartered jets, maskless, with at least one case of light beer, and hopped on the jets to come to Washington, D.C.
Texas Governor Greg Abbot told KVUE that as soon as they come back to Texas, they will be arrested and cabined inside the Texas Capitol until they get their job done. Green explained how arresting the lawmakers would work.
Texans feel so strongly about this, we put it in the Constitution that we could force these legislators to get back to work. And so then in the House rules, they have a mechanism in what's known as Rule 5, Section 8, where they can literally tell the sergeant at arms, go arrest these members, drag them into the chamber, lock the door, and let's get the work of Texas done.
And on Tuesday, the Texas House did just that in a 76-4 vote and authorized arrest warrants for the Democratic lawmakers who are absent without excuse. On the same day, President Biden expressed his disapproval of the new voting bills being passed in red states.
This year alone, 17 states have enacted, not just proposed, but enacted 28 new laws to make it harder for Americans to vote.
Many Republicans believe the new laws are to improve voting integrity, while Democrats believe they are suppressing voter rights. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Larry Elder has announced he's running for governor in California's recall election. Governor Newsom will not be listed as a Democrat on the ballot after a judge denied his lawsuit.
Radio host Larry Elder announced on Monday night that he will run for California's recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom. Elder held a celebration in Los Angeles on Tuesday. Critics have derided Newsom for his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and other issues.
He's imposed mandates without paying attention to the science that they claim that they care about. He has ignored the very mandates he imposed on everybody else. His own children remained in in-person private education. He exempted his own business from the mandates. And our schools have deteriorated in quality.
The 69-year-old is an author and host of his daily radio program, The Larry Elder Show. In a statement on his campaign website, he wrote, "I'm running for governor because the decline of California isn't the fault of its people. Our government is what's ruining the Golden State." Elder says it does not matter that Newsom will not appear as a Democrat on the ballot for his recall election.
The problem is him, not his party affiliation. And I'm not running against Democrats. I'm running against Gavin Newsom. The guy has got to go. He's got to go. He's been arrogant. Crime has gone up. Homelessness has gone up.
Other candidates who have announced their run for governor include former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, California State Assembly member Kevin Kiley, and former gubernatorial candidate John Cox. The recall election has been officially set for September 14th. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
And the U.S. government says you might want to think twice before doing business in China's Xinjiang region because you might violate U.S. law. Over 1 million ethnic Uyghurs are being tortured and jailed there simply for being Uyghur. NTD's Phil Zhou reports.
Companies that continue doing business in Xinjiang, China could be breaking U.S. law because of the human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party. That's according to an updated warning from the U.S. government, including Homeland Security and the Department of Labor. Zubaira Shamsuddin knows this all too well as she's been fighting for Uyghur human rights and political freedom since the 1980s.
The U.S. businesses who are still doing business in East Turkestan, Xinjiang, they should stop. Because otherwise they will be complicit of China's government's genocidal policy.
She says the Chinese Communist Party targets everyone, including Uyghur businessmen, intellectuals, even regular people simply because they are Uyghurs, an ethnic and religious community.
The millions of people are still detained in the concentration camps, and the condition of the concentration camps are just horrific.
The Labor Department says the Chinese regime's crimes against humanity include torture, rape, forced sterilization, restricting freedom of religion and freedom of movement.
They definitely killing those people mentally, physically, and emotionally. So that all these have to stop.
Just last week, President Biden blacklisted 14 Chinese companies for alleged human rights abuses and surveillance in Xinjiang, China, adding to the list of companies originally banned during the Trump administration. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis wants Floridian companies to provide internet to residents in Cuba. This comes as a communist Cuban regime shuts down internet services amid mass civilian uprising. NTD's Grace Coulter has the details.
You have mentioned here today.
Governor Ron DeSantis held a roundtable with Republican lawmakers and members of the Cuban exile community in Miami Tuesday. The Florida governor pitched an idea to help the Cuban people as they enter their third day of uprising.
What does the regime do when you start to see these images? They shut down the internet. They don't want the truth to be out. They don't want people to be able to communicate. And so one of the things I think we should be able to do with our private companies or with the United States is to provide some of that internet service via satellite. We have companies on the Space Coast that launch these things.
He didn't provide details on how to turn on remote hotspots, but added he would make calls on what the options are to make it happen. DeSantis said everyone present agreed that the Cubans are not complaining about a lack of vaccine or for some tangential issue. He said they're revolting against a corrupt communist dictatorship that has ruled the island with an iron fist for over 60 years. And dozens of demonstrators shut down a section of highway in Miami-Dade County Tuesday afternoon to show solidarity with Cubans fighting for freedom. The scene was captured in this video. According to local news reports, another group of demonstrators near the area were chanting a call to President Biden to put an end to communism. As of 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, traffic was still at a standstill in the northbound lanes. Local authorities asked drivers to avoid the expressway and use the Florida Turnpike instead. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
In Washington, D.C., right outside the Capitol, a group of activists protested against Beijing hosting the 2022 Winter Olympics. They tell NTD that allowing Beijing to host the Games only emboldens the regime to continue with their human rights atrocities. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more from the protest in D.C.
A number of ethnic and religious groups gathered in front of the Capitol Tuesday to express why they believe Communist China does not deserve to host the 2022 Olympics.
China is the only country that has hosted 2 Olympics back-to-back. They hosted the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, and now all of a sudden in 2022, they're hosting again. No one else has ever done that. So not only should they not be hosting, they should be banned, and they should be declared a transnational criminal organization, and we should be breaking off all diplomatic and economic ties with them.
Ethnic groups like Tibetans and Mongolians have had their spiritually rich cultures devastated by the Chinese regime. Other ethnic and religious groups like Uyghurs, Christians, and Falun Gong practitioners face jail time, torture, or even live organ harvesting if they don't renounce their faith. This Uyghur woman has family members in China who've been jailed and tortured for years. She tells NTD she regularly receives blackmail phone calls from CCP members, threatening her that they will continue to abuse her mother, sister, and uncle if she doesn't stop speaking out against the party's mass genocide.
And one of the speakers is giving a warning to big corporations and name brands who are going along with the Olympics in Beijing, what they're calling the genocide games, because he says eventually they'll be ruining their brands by going along with this. He says that Olympics were founded based on brotherhood of man, which is completely contrary to the evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, well, the nature of it is pure evil. I would say the nature of it is something that is totally ungodly. They have tried to make a god of themselves. And look inside yourself and see what you really think, not what the political correctness thinks, things like that, but also find people who have been through persecution, who have been through torture, read about what's really happening.
An organizer of these protests says this is about people standing with upright principles and morals.
Although people may not see anything in the short term, but the long term is that these types of activities have also gained the support of folks on both sides.
Senator Mitt Romney has just called for a U.S. diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. The European Union just passed a resolution calling for such a boycott. Now Romney and these protesters hope Congress will follow their example and do the same. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
A professional basketball player is using a recent game to speak up for Uyghurs held in China's internment camps. Prominent Uyghur activists are praising him for it. NTD's Ellison Lee has that story.
Royce White once played for the Houston Rockets, but he made a name for himself because he did what the NBA didn't do, speaking up for victims of Communist China's human rights abuses. This is what he told CBS in an interview following a Big Three game last Saturday.
Free the Uyghurs, 2 million ethnic minorities in East Turkestan, China, in concentration camps, something we got to talk about. You know I'm always going to talk about the real things.
The Chinese regime has held an estimated 1 million Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic minorities in China's Xinjiang region. White hoped to use the game as a platform to highlight the issue. He wrote on Twitter the next day, "When you know a moment like this should be going viral, but instead you get crickets from media outlets, that's when you know you're doing it the right way." The basketball player has also changed his Twitter profile photo to the Free the Uyghurs sign and pinned the post. His current league, the Big Three, also shared a picture of his interview. The World Uyghur Congress is praising him and contrasting White's actions with what the NBA did. They wrote, "Last year, the NBA apologized when its general manager, Daryl Morey, voiced support for protests in Hong Kong. Thank you. We need more athletes like Royce White." Back in 2019, the NBA apologized to China for making what they called inappropriate remarks. That's after the general manager of Houston Rockets tweeted a photo that says, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." The NBA has since faced intense backlash for their stance on China. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Hong Kong's democracy continues to crumble under pressure from Beijing. The city's district councilors are now being forced to pledge allegiance to the local government controlled by Beijing, or else they will be unseated. Many are saying they can't take it anymore. Here's NTD's Penny Zhou.
Some 200 Hong Kong district councilors are quitting their jobs. That's because they support the city's pro-democracy movement. Yet they are required to swear oath of allegiance to the city's government, which many see as a puppet controlled by Beijing's Communist Party. Hong Kong media report that district councilors are forced into taking the oath, or else they get disqualified, kicked off the council, and made to give back their wages.
The threats that the government is posing on the district councillors is actually that they will chase back your money and you can go bankrupt because of that, because you have spent all those money on the community. That is a risk that people don't want to take.
The pro-democracy camp won a landslide victory in the city's 2019 election and secured over 80% of the nearly 500 seats. These councillors take care of city-level issues.
It is clearly shown that Hong Kong people are in support for the pro-democracy camp. That is no doubt.
Some say the mass resignation could cripple the district council's operation. Questioned about that possibility, the city's chief executive responded,
"That factor is not to be considered by us because we have to implement the law. Should there be any outcome, any consequences, we will deal with them."
The resignations may also result in the pro-Beijing camp taking back control of the council. Earlier this year, Beijing revised Hong Kong's election system and now mandates that only those considered patriots by the Chinese regime's definition can rule Hong Kong.
After the national security law is passed, everybody knows the risk of being in politics is much higher, that you may be subjected to arrest and prosecution that you have never imagined before.
Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Reporting your family to the authorities has a bad ring to it, especially to people who know a little history about communism. The FBI got a lot of backlash for a report of theirs, asking people to tell on their families if they see signs of violent extremism. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
The report's been around for years. Homegrown violent extremist mobilization indicators. The FBI revived the 32-page report with a post that put off some users and lawmakers. Family members and peers are often best positioned to witness signs of mobilization to violence, learn to spot suspicious behaviors, and report them to the FBI. Trump-era National Intelligence Acting Director Richard Grenell replied, "This is outrageous. The FBI has a growing credibility problem, and this type of sinister snitching is clearly unhelpful." Republican Senator Ted Cruz, in both Cuba and China, they also asked children to spy on their parents. Inside, the report says it was created in response to a heightened threat from homegrown violent extremists going back to 2015. It lists 46 indicators that, if seen in combination in someone, that person could be a violent extremist. Like Indicator 2, seeking religious or political justification for a planned violent attack. Or Indicator 10, inquiring about jobs that give sensitive access in a suspicious manner. We contacted the FBI for comment, but we haven't heard back. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The Federal Communications Commission voted unanimously on a $1.9 billion program to reimburse American telecommunications companies for removing Chinese equipment. Last year, Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE were deemed national security threats. The government ordered American companies to remove their equipment from American telecommunications infrastructure. The acting FCC chairwoman said the equipment could be manipulated, disrupted, or controlled by foreign actors. She said the quest to root out all such equipment is a daunting task for the FCC. Its newest order expands the companies eligible for reimbursement from those with 2 million or fewer customers to those with 10 million or fewer customers. The FCC also bars equipment from Chinese companies Hytera, Hikvision, and Dahua.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.